So a little bit ago, I did my video on my third part of my actual play, or not actual play, my campaign diary, is how I'm referring to it, for Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. And during that, I mentioned that I have about, 2 chapters of actual, gameplay material left to go on the book. And from where I'm sitting, having read over the adventure, that those next 2 chapters are probably going to go fairly quick, potentially getting through those 2 chapters in about as long as it took for me to get through the previous chapter of the game, of the adventure. So, which means as a game master, it's time for me to start planning for what the next campaign will be and start doing prep and all that sort of thing. And consequently, I have my next session and campaign in mind, and that campaign will be running Shadowrun. And specifically, I'm not going to be running Shadowrun using the Shadowrun rules necessarily. Instead, I'm going to be using Kevin Crawford's Cities Without Number role-playing game. What does that mean? Well, Cities Without Number is a game that's part of what's called the OSR, or Old School. I prefer Renaissance or Revolution. Either one honestly works. And his rules for the for fantasy with Worlds Without Number, before that Stars Without Number, which is science fiction, and the most recent one, Ashes Without Number, which is post-apocalyptic, all based around sort of sandbox play. I'm not quite going to be doing that necessarily. Instead, what I'm going to be running is I'm going to be adapting various adventures for Shadowrun 1st and 2nd edition to the Cities Without Number system. Why not use Shadowrun 2nd edition? Well, the short version is the various iterations of Shadowrun rules have various degrees of cruft and clunk to them, which I'm fine with them. I was introduced to Shadowrun with Shadowrun 1st edition. I'm okay with that, but my players, it may be a bit of a hurdle to go over. And some of the elements of Cities Without Numbers mechanically are somewhat similar to Dungeons and Dragons rules. You're doing a lot, but not all, but a lot of skill, not skill checks, but combat rolls using a d20. You're using 2d6 for skill checks, but it's higher is better, that sort of thing. So I was like, okay, this is a good transition point where I can introduce the players to the Shadowrun setting through this mechanism, go through a couple adventures to get the players into things, and then later decide, okay, do we want to do actual Shadowrun rules? And the way the campaign is going to be structured is something like this. And we are going to be starting the timeline at 2050, the start of Shadowrun 1st edition. And I'll be running adventures, not every adventure, but a selection of adventures that will move the timeline forward. And during this time as well, I'll also run some additional adventures I've written myself using guidelines from the Cities Without Number rules for runs for the players to take on. These will be informed by actions they have taken over the course of the campaign. If the player's characters make allies with a particular NPC, I have an opportunity to bring them back for additional adventures using these rules, using the standard Cities Without Number generated job rules. I will have additionally, if there's someone who they antagonize particularly, I can bring them back as a villain. Possibly even as a recurring villain, especially if they don't show up in later adventures and you don't kill them off necessarily. So there's some room to make things interesting over the course of the game in that way, to set up hooks and pay them off later, depending on player character actions. Anyway, it was just sticking to the Adventures Shadowrun rules and wouldn't. I mean, I can still create my own adventures and build off of them and that sort of thing. But Saves Without Number has interesting frameworks for generating all of that. That said, Shadowrun works on a higher power curve, or power level, better putting it, than starting Saves Without Number at the ground level. So we're doing a few things figured out so far. First off, player characters can be starting at level 2. A Saves Without Number uses a level and experience point-based system. And I've also taken the cues from other games for Saves Without Number to up the power curve and power level and a few other respects for the player characters. For starters, I've given them more contacts. One close buddy contact, and then 2 general contacts. It reflects the fact that player characters in Shadowrun, even from the jump, tend to start out with more contacts out of the gate than they do in Saves Without Number. Saves Without Number, you get 1, unless you use resources at character generation to get more. Starting with level 2, get more cash to them. However, the starting at level 2 also informs other aspects of play. One of the other main developments, or things I'm doing for the players, and we'll get more into this when the campaign actually starts and I do my prologue episode, my episode 0, I guess I would say, is player characters are encouraged, or asking them to, everybody has worked with 2 other characters, which in a group of 4 player characters means you do know most of the group already on previous jobs. And so encouraging the characters to, okay, figure out what you worked on, what kind of jobs you've done, that sort of thing. The sense that these characters trust each other. Additionally, useful thing for cyberpunk role-playing games in general is to have a common fixer who you all know sets you up on this job. Because I want this fixer to be someone who player characters trust and have some investment in them, I've also put in the suggestion, okay, you as a group get to decide who the fixer is. Come up with a name, come up with some character traits for them, that sort of thing. Give them more investment for the group, and also just make things kind of fun. Other than that, I put together a selection of, in addition to providing them a copy of the rules, a selection of Shadowrun rulebooks for them to peruse and discuss, hey, if there's a particular weapon that you like, let's talk about it and see about statting it up as necessary, because a big chunk of Shadowrun is a degree of style. You're not just using a submachine gun, you're using an Ingram Smart Gun. So what does that mean from a mechanical standpoint? What makes it different from any other submachine gun? And then figure out, okay, stat-wise, how does that work? Last big part is, for this is, I provided the player characters with, or the players with a list of reference media, a kind of Appendix N that unfortunately a lot of cyberpunk games don't have. I'll probably end up putting together a cyberpunk anime Appendix N video at some point. I don't think I've done one already, but it feels like something that should be done, same way that I have with fantasy. Again, this is going to be several months out before this campaign actually starts, but now is the time for Game Master prep. Other notes, as far as for my long-term plans of the campaign, with the full knowledge that the best laid plans of mice, men, and game masters often go astray, the current plan is, if everything works out well and the players are enjoying themselves, is that this campaign starts at 2050 and is going to go over the course of the first decade of Shadowrun's plot. The thing I like about Shadowrun and its meta plot is it advances, but it advances in a way where it doesn't make the player characters feel useless. If I'm running a crime series, a crime campaign set in the modern 21st century heist series, things are going to happen in the world that affect what the players are doing that are completely beyond their control, but it can influence how things go. If I'm running a leverage game, for example, I might, I could be reasonably confident that actual Jeffrey Epstein stuff would be an actual kind of no-go for the players in terms of a bridge too far, a bit too heavy. But I can, and for the in the sense of the characters going after a Epstein analog, but on the other hand, a analog of someone who might be in the Epstein files works as a figure, as a figure for a mark, or perhaps a recurring antagonist, or even the whole campaign based around, hey, all these guys are in the files, let's rip them off in a restorative justice way, kind of thing. But that's a thing where for these characters would go, they would have not necessarily have any impact on the actual contents of the files getting out necessarily. They could. That'd be an interesting late campaign thing. But at a lower level, there's things happening at the larger world geopolitical levels and econopolitical levels that are beyond what the player characters can directly impact. And the same thing applies to Shadowrun. So corporations will come into conflict with each other. Members of internal factions within a corporation will get into conflict with each other. And all of them will have will have opportunities for adventure and heists and bodyguarding work and all sorts of other stuff that can spin out of this as the campaign moves along. And that's kind of the structure that I have in mind. So we shall see how that all works out. If it doesn't, and honestly, there's a very real possibility that the players are like, no, actually, this particular tone of campaign doesn't fit what we want to play. We prefer something more actively heroic, or as opposed to something kind of more anti-heroic and conflicted, and with the sort of noir shades of gray. So, in which case, like, we've talked this over with the group. There are plans B and plan C in mind for what subsequent campaigns and such would be. And if that comes to pass where I end up running something else, I will discuss that here. But in the meantime, as far as what this means for video content for the channel, I'll be running several adventures. After going through those adventures, I will give it my thoughts on actually running Cities Without Number as a game master. Running it, not just having read it. I will then give some discussion into how, after each adventure, for the pre-written for the adventures I'm adapting from the ones written by or published by FASA, I will discuss how well those adapted, what steps I took in adapting them from one system to another, and what the players thought. When it comes to original material, those I'll probably do after a few of those. I will may do an overview in terms of, hey, here's what I ran, and what campaign events happened in between adventures after I get through a particular block. Likely what will happen is whatever I run in between a couple of pre-written ones, I will discuss those at the beginning of that campaign diary episode to set up where we are at as within the adventures of our team. So that's current plans for the future. More to come as that campaign actually starts.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Tossing me a few bucks also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.